I'm Michael with the Plays with Cars YouTube channel, and this is our 1988 Ford Thunderbird Turbo Coupe. Our most popular video so far has been our rebuttal to Doug DeMuro on his review of the full-size Ford Bronco using our old 92 Bronco as the backdrop to go over all the quirks and features that Doug missed. This was easily our most popular video, although we did get quite a few comments of, hey, you got a couple of things wrong, which we fully admit to. I am no expert on Broncos or four-wheel drive trucks, but also just, hey, that was kind of cool. You should do some cars that Doug won't touch. Again, love Doug DeMuro, love watching his reviews, but he reviews $1 million supercars and $70,000 luxury cars. He doesn't review kind of the normal stuff. And the guys that do like the regular car reviews and things like that, they're with Grandma's Buick Century. No one is doing cool enthusiast cars that people actually want to build. So this is our first shot at the Plays with Cars review. We're going to do all the quirks and features and stuff like that, like Doug likes to do, and we're going to do kind of our own take on things and see what works out. So hopefully this is the comprehensive review of the best Fox body car ever made. Let me explain. You see, the Fox body debuted in 1978 with the Ford Fairmont and Fairmont Futura, and eventually became the Mustang, the Cougar, the Capri, and the Thunderbird. This 1988 Ford Thunderbird Turbo Coupe is the last of the Fox body T-Birds, and possibly the best factory Fox body ever built. You see, the Thunderbird was put on a longer wheelbase chassis than almost all of the other Fox bodies and had a wider track width, so it's actually a completely unique Fox body. Well, yes, all of the mounting points are the same as like a Fox body Mustang or an SN95 like our old Project Cobra. The lengths of the control arms are not, so it's wider control arms up front, longer control arms in the back. This changes how the car drives dramatically. The Thunderbird is so much more sure-footed and planted and handles so much better out of the box than any other factory Fox body had. So we're going to start with the engine, because enthusiast cars, the engine is kind of the most important thing. And this is definitely what makes the Thunderbird Turbo Coupe so unique. As you can see, this is not a V8. This is a 2.3 liter inline four-cylinder. This engine is called the Lima engine, named for the plant that the engine is manufactured in, like many Ford motors, the Windsor, the Romeo, the Cleveland. The Lima is a 2.3 liter, all iron block, iron head, inline four-cylinder, single overhead cam. This motor debuted in the Ford Pinto, was used in the Mustang II, was used in the Fox body Mustang, Ford Ranger, vehicles like that, and anywhere from 2 liters to 2.5 liters, and most of them were naturally aspirated and didn't make any horsepower. The 2.3 turbo debuted with the Turbo GT Mustangs, the Fox body Mustangs, and it was a terrible power plant. It had a draw-through turbocharger setup with a carburetor. What that means is air would go through a carburetor mounted on top of the engine, mix with the fuel, go through the turbocharger, obviously fuel in a hot turbo, not the greatest idea in the world, and then into the motor. It was a terrible setup. It underperformed. They canceled it after a while, and for a few years it was back to naturally aspirated. In 1983, this engine came back in the Ford Thunderbird Turbo Coupe and Mercury Cougar XR7 as a 2.3 liter EFI turbocharged motor, electronic fuel injection. Gone were the draw-through carburetor setups. Now you had blow-through. The air would go through the turbocharger, blow through the throttle body here, and into the motor. The fuel would be added very last. With the computer controls, the engine was a much higher performer and much more reliable, and it was finally the performance motor that could strike the fuel economy needs of the time too, that Ford really wanted all along. It was also released in the Turbo GT Mustangs. Now for 1984, Ford added this, an air-to-air intercooler, and debuted it in the SVO Mustang. Now the engine really started making some power, up to 190 rated horsepower, out of 2.3 liters in the mid-80s. You have to think back then, The 5.0 Mustang was what, 205 horsepower out of 5 liters of V8? And here you've got 190 plus horsepower out of a 2.3 liter with better fuel economy and the works. So the SVO Mustang was a great performer. It didn't sell very well. It was too expensive. Meanwhile, the Ford Thunderbird Turbo Coupe was selling like hotcakes. People were really intrigued by this particular engine combination. So for 87 and 88, when Ford restyled the Thunderbird into the Aerobird, they decided to go whole hog and finally put the intercooler in the T-Bird for the first time. Now, this brings us to our first quirk. You can see here that there is air ducting. These are functional hood scoops. This is a NACA-style duct, and it draws air from the outside of the hood here through these ducts, down through this ductwork, and blows it through the air-to-air intercooler. Now, it's not the most efficient setup in the world. Obviously, the turbocharger is right there underneath the intercooler and can get pretty hot, making this thing more like a heat sink when you're in traffic. However, once you get moving and you get air coming through this, it really is effective. So for not that much engineering cost of adding this thing on and giving the car a whole lot of cool points, Ford was able to make 190 horsepower out of this engine for 87 and 88 in the T-Bird. Now, some other quirks in here that are T-Bird specific. In 87 and 88, Ford Thunderbird Turbo Coupes got a ABS braking system. This is an automatic braking system. What it does is it prevents you from locking the wheels. When you slam on the brakes to stop the car, older cars, they would literally lock on the brakes, so the wheel wouldn't spin anymore. You'd flat spot a tire. You would skid. Now, skidding is slow. Skidding is not going to get you stopped. ABS systems, they have a little thing in here that pulsates, and what it does, you keep your foot firm to the floor, and this little motor in here will open and close a little bleeder valve, letting the brake pads release just ever so slightly to keep the wheel turning. That way you come to a stop using the traction instead of sliding. This ABS system was a 4-channel ABS system, meaning it has an individual valve for each wheel. So it was completely independent, and it worked fantastically, as evidenced by the fact that this car is over 30 years old and this system still works flawlessly. Other features that the Turbo Coupe had was standard power steering. Obviously the brakes were power, and something that is super unique to the Fox body, this is the only Fox chassis car made with a hydraulic clutch setup. All other Fox chassis had a clutch cable. So it uses an actual wire cable, much like the brake cable on your mountain bike or road bike, to actuate the clutch from the pedal to the clutch fork down on the transmission. The 87 and 88 only Thunderbird Turbo Coupes had this hydraulic clutch setup with a little clutch master and slave cylinder down under on the firewall to hydraulically operate the clutch. Ford switched to this style of clutch setup with the S197 Mustangs in 2005. None of the Fox bodies, even all the way through 04, used this other than the T-Bird, making these parts rare as hen's teeth. Now, for 1983 through 1986, Ford used this turbocharger. This is a Garrett T3 turbocharger on their 2.3-liter turbo motors. In 87 and 88, in the Turbo Coupe only, they switched to a smaller turbo from a company called IHI. Now, one of the most popular upgrades to do to the 87 and 88 T-Birds is to take the little IHI off, put the big T3 on, but keep the air-to-air intercooler. This is good for about 210 horsepower with completely factory components and no other changes needed or required. The T3 Turbo is larger, more efficient, and comes at the cost of just a teensy little bit more lag time, but there's other things you can do to mitigate that, including just a little bit more boost. So let's talk about chassis. This is a Fox chassis car, just like a 79 to 04 Mustang, just like Ford Fairmont. Mercury Cougar ran on this chassis too, but the T-Bird was unique. The T-Bird was on a longer wheelbase version and had a wider track than all of the other Fox bodies. That made this car handle better out of the box than any other Fox body built. It also means that there's more potential to this car for enthusiasts like us. If you want to lower it, if you want to put better suspension in it, if you want it to handle better, it has these larger wheel wells with much more width to them, plus the wider track width of the car itself, meaning you can stuff really gigantic wheels and tires in this without touching the body at all, and the suspension can actually handle it. The lower control arms in the front are longer even than an SN95 Mustang, and the control arms on the rear axle are longer as well. This gives the suspension more travel and more ability to be used. It also means this car has less bump steer in it than any other Fox body from the factory, meaning when you do lower it, it has less of a bump steer problem than all of the other Fox body cars. All of these inherent engineering factors are what makes this car so much better handling than all the other Fox bodies. So let's talk aerodynamics. The 87 and 88 Thunderbird Turbo Coupe, and really the V8 and V6 Thunderbirds too, were coined the Aerobirds. They were called this because they were literally aerodynamic, highly aerodynamic for the time. Bill Elliott, in a NASCAR, back in the day when they had to run stock production bodies on them, went 212 miles an hour at Talladega Motor Speedway, a record that still stands to this day with this body. Bob Glidden won the NHRA Pro Stock Championship, going nearly undefeated and setting speed records at every track with this body. This car is so fantastic. Now you'll notice there's no opening. This thing might as well be a Tesla. It has no grille at all. The base model T-Birds and V8 T-Birds had a grille here in the middle with a crosshatch pattern in it for the air to get into. The Aerobird Thunderbird Turbo Coupes did not. The only little grille you see are these three little inlets here. All of the air is actually drawn from underneath and pushed up through here into the radiator. There's supposed to be a little spoiler on there. Ours is missing. Now, fun fact. The base model Thunderbirds, the V6 and V8s with their grille here, have a different inner corner light than the Thunderbird Turbo Coupes. Theirs actually comes in at a much sharper angle, meaning these corner lights are unique to the 87 and 88 Thunderbird only, to the Turbo Coupe only, making them highly valuable. These inner and outer lights are shared with all of the other T-Birds. However, they are not shared with the 87 and 88 Mercury Cougars. Their headlights, much like the back of their roofs, were more upright and are not compatible with the Thunderbirds. Now here's a fun option that was available on all the Thunderbirds, but was also available on the Turbo Coupe, a cornering light. When you put the turn signals on a car equipped with cornering lights, a bright light in here, much like a fog light, lights up and directs the light onto the ground and in front of you so you can see where you're turning. This is especially useful at night when you're trying to turn into a driveway or something off of like an old county road that doesn't have good lane markings and might have a ditch or something in the way. This was actually a really fantastic idea, and it was an optional extra. The T-Birds that didn't have these had this trim piece completely flush. Fun fact, those cars also, the metal underneath is all there. Only on the cars with cornering lights is there a hole cut in the metal, or actually punched in the metal from the factory. Meaning, if you want to run a lighter fender and keep your trim piece, you would find fenders from a cornering light car, leave all the lights out of it, put your main trim piece back on, and now you've cut out that much extra weight from the car. A lot of your aftermarket fenders always have the holes. A completely flush fender, that's a factory original fender for a non-cornering light car. Speaking of lighting options, back in the 80s, factory fog lights were one of the most popular options on the list for any car. The Turbo Coupes had them from 83 through 86 as well, but in 87 and 88 they switched from a Marshall lamp to a Hella lamp. Now these lamps were still available new about 10 years ago. Fun fact, I actually used to own a business that made parts for these things, restoration and speed parts, and one of the things I did was buy stock from Hella and sell new replacements of these lights. I don't know if they're still around, either my old business, which I sold off, or Hella's stock of these, but I don't need to find out because they still work perfect in my car. Here's one of the main ways that this car is so much better than all the other Fox bodies. Fox body Mustangs, including the SN95 and new edges, like our old Project Cobra, have a huge plastic cowl here, or a metal cowl on the older Fox body Mustangs, with the wipers on it. The Turbo Coupe does not have that. The 87 and 88 T-Birds have what's called a flush system. So the hood goes all the way back to the windshield, and then the wipers tuck down using the wiper motor while not in use. When you turn the wipers on, they actually pop up here quite a bit before being able to run. This keeps them out of the air for a much more slippery shape. This is what helped contribute to the Aerobird setting all those speed records. Another thing is the doors are framed. Now on a Fox body Mustang, they're framed with a thin little frame, and the A-pillar stays put on the car. On the SN95 Mustangs, it's frameless, and you just have glass floating. The Turbo Coupe uses an aircraft fuselage style door where the whole A-pillar is actually part of the door. So when you open up the door, it is this very large and heavy door. However, it makes for a much quieter inside the car because there's not a lot of pieces here for the air to get caught into, and it keeps the window nice and sealed. These cars are super quiet inside compared to all the other Fox bodies. Moving around to the trunk, you find a very large opening, a nice canaverous trunk. Goes pretty deep as well. Now the back seat in the Thunderbird does not fold down, unlike the Fox body Mustangs and the SN95s and whatnot, making the car a little bit more structurally sound, but it also limits kind of the big stuff you can put in there. You'll find a not a full size, but a spare tire here in this little well in the back with a jack and all of that stuff. And then also over here is kind of a neat little feature. This is a fuel door manual override. So if the little button inside stops working and you still need to put gas in, you can just pull that and then get a little piece of Velcro to put it on there, and it pops open your fuel door. Now this is a feature Doug has talked about before, especially in like his Lincoln Navigator video and other Fords that are pretty well optioned, and that's this Ford patented keyless entry system. Now this came out in the 80s. Ford had it on the Lincolns, some Mercuries, and some Fords like the T-Bird, and it's really a cool setup. You see the code that can be found in the trunk, you type that in, and the door's unlocked. This keypad has extra functions other than just unlocking and locking the door. You see, when you type in your code, it will unlock this door. Or if you hit the second button after the code, it will unlock the passenger door. If you hit the third button after the code, it will pop the trunk. Ready? So we were able to pop the trunk and unlock all the doors. If you want to lock all the doors, it's just these two here. I know it's hard to make out here in the light, but these keys holes are illuminated. So whenever you go to pull up on the handle on the car, these will light up or unlock the doors so that you can see the keyhole at night. That's smart. Extra detail. Also notice, metal, not plastic, as are the door handles themselves. That's quality. Now here's a fun quirk design feature of the Thunderbird Turbo Coupe. This trim panel here on the quarter panel is plastic. The same trim panel here on the front of the quarter panel is a funky kind of rubber. The ones here in between the tires are this rubber resistant, so when the door hits on something, it helps prevent door dings, and it's softer and pliable so it doesn't break. That same material wasn't needed here on the pieces that don't move, so these got to be plastic. The ones on the bumper are actually integrated into the bumper cover itself. They're not removable at all. Now we come to the 87 and 88 Thunderbird's most original feature, which are these taillights. These taillights are a three-piece design. They have an inner lens, an outer lens, and sandwiched in between them is this grill that has these horizontal streaks through it. The taillights had this really cool factory black fog look on them when they were off, making for a really unique looking full-width rear. And when you turn the lights on, you get these three red roundels on each side, making for a really unique look at night, especially considering the horizontal slats going through the lights. These taillights are extremely unique, only found on the 87 and 88 Thunderbirds, making them very rare and valuable today. They've never been reproduced. Now, opening these gigantic canaverous doors, we can finally get inside the T-Bird and see all of the features that make the Turbo Coupe really, really cool. This is the kind of thing that should make Doug go absolutely nuts. These cars are bananas with their quirks and features. Now, you have a little light in here that illuminates the ground for when you get in, and a reflector built in. This nice big door panel with a padded dash piece here. And here's where you get into some fun stuff. This door handle, it's metal. That is actual chrome metal not plastic like the Fox Body Mustangs and the SN95s and the new Edges. Nice and quality. This door lock switch panel here, metal, not plastic. You can see this car is equipped with premium sound. It's got a 6.5-inch round speaker in there, power door locks, power mirrors, and those are all controlled down here in this center stack. See, they moved all of their controls here to the center for dual power seats. You've got forward, back, seat up, seat down, and then an independent rear tilt and front tilt. You can watch all these function here on the passenger seat. So we've got forward, back, up, down, rear tilt, and front tilt. Additionally, the seats have another feature, which is here on the side, power lumbar. If you do this, it will inflate a bladder here on the lumbar. You can actually see it inflating. And the final parlor trick of the seats is these thigh bolsters, or thigh supports, actually can be extended. They're manual, but you grab and pull, and you can extend those out as well. Neat little interesting feature that most T-Bird owners don't even know they have. Back on the center stack, you'll also find your power mirror switch with a left and a right select, and then your 4 ways to go, and then a middle neutral switch to keep from bumping it, actually changing your mirrors. You also have an up and a down for your power windows. Notice that all of these are metal. This car is 32 years old, and every one of these switches still works completely correctly and looks fantastic because they are metal. They're designed to last. They're not plastic. One of the unique features of the Turbo Coupe compared to the standard Thunderbirds was this key that had turbo embossed on it, which actually matched the same embossing they had on the shift knob. Now when you go to start the car, all fairly normal, you'll see that down here is a Systems Sentry. This Systems Sentry tells you things like door ajar. So when I open the door here, that comes on. If your oil is low, the check oil light will come on. Low washer fluid, low fuel, rear lamp out, and a low beam out. You also have your cigarette lighter and output down here. Now we get into the options. Turbo Coupes could be had with a standard manual climate control or this optional automatic climate control. We've got buttons to control everything, a rear defroster, front defroster, and the neat thing about this is that you can tell this to do more than one thing at a time. You can set AC, you can go not AC, you could have floor, you could do the defrost. Everything functions as it should. Oh, you can hear the stuff coming through the air vents now. Turn that off. Next you have the factory the factory radio setup. This is the factory premium sound with graphic equalizer. If I turn this on, you will see this equalizer light up, and you can fade the speakers front and back, and you can independently turn the equalizer on and off. You can see the little lights coming on here as things happen. I have that all turned off. Now, there's also, this is one of the first cars to have an automatic ride control. So you can put it in auto, and the shocks would be in soft. They would firm up automatically if they detected something was going on, or you could put it in firm ride and it would stay in the firm ride all the time. This car also had a fuel button. Now this is not a sport button, it's a fuel button. What it is in regular, it would reduce the timing tables in the computer so that the car could run on a lower octane and still get good gas mileage and save the engine. When you put premium in it, you did this and it would give you more boost and more timing to match the premium quality gas, the higher octane level, the resistance to knock. On this side, you get the automatic lights. Now this is cool. You have a regular light switch to turn your lights on and off like normal. The medium or the middle rocker here is just parking lights. That's full headlights like normal, panel dim. You also have an auto lamp, so it will automatically dim the inside lamps. That's this roller. And then this one automatically turns on the outside lamps. There's also a separate fog light switch. Now the sensor for those automatic lights is up here underneath the rear view mirror. This sensor right here is what tells the automatic lights to turn on. Again, 32 years old and still functions perfectly in this. One of the neat things that the Thunderbird Turbo Coupes got was this clock. regular standard digital clock like most 80s cars. However, it also had an elapsed time counter. When you have the elapsed time counter on, you could stop, start, and reset your lap times. So you could actually use this to time yourself around a racetrack. Now here in the glove box, you'll find this is the trunk release button to open the trunk, and this is the fuel door release button. Now here on the steering wheel, there's no airbag. Those were not mandated until 1989, meaning the 87 and 88 Thunderbird Turbo Coupe are some of the last cars you could get to have a steering wheel designed without an airbag. It's actually a pretty cool looking steering wheel. It's just a 2-spoke, a little unusual, but it's got these nice big grip areas here for your hands to go, making it actually one of the most comfortable steering wheels on the market at the time. Also here in the center console, you'll find this nice padded armrest, and underneath that is quite a canaverous glove box area with a little map light. Here I am in the back seat of the T-Bird, sitting behind myself as I would do if I was driving the car. Now you can see there's actually quite a bit of room back here. I fit nicely. I've got decent amount of legroom and knee room. Headroom might be a little soft, but I have kind of a long torso. I bet Doug, who's quite a bit taller than me, would probably be sitting in here about like this. Now up top here is probably the best single feature of this car. This is the power moonroof. Now, the button is up here with the map lights, which you just push the whole map light for the map light to come on. And if you hit this rocker, you can tilt the roof up like that. Or if you hit the rocker the other way, there's closed, and then there is fully open. Now this moonroof is large, and I do mean properly large. The other cool thing about it is it's a true moonroof. The glass panel goes into the roof, underneath the metal, above the headliner. It goes into its own pocket. When I say that the moonroof is large, I meant it. This is me standing in the moonroof. It makes for a really nice open-top experience, despite the fact that the T-Bird is a hardtop. Another clever thing about the moonroof is this pop-up wind deflector. As the glass moves back on the track, this little arm pulls up and opens up this deflector, deflecting wind up and over the moonroof opening, preventing all the cavitation of the air and loud noises and buffeting that happens. Again, all made out of metal and very clever. Let's talk wheels. The Thunderbird Turbo Coupe at 87 and 88 got these really unique wheels. They were 16 by 8, and the term form is called a snowflake. They are ridiculously hard to clean, as you can tell by how filthy these are. Now, these were a aluminum wheel that were then clear coated. That clear coat fades over time and gives it this kind of white, milky looking substance or surface coating on them. The center caps are stainless steel brushed and retain the same look. Really low mileage turbo coupes that have been garaged have really fantastic looking snowflakes that the whole wheel still looks like the center cap. They're really quite impressive looking. And because this is Plays with Cars and not Doug DeMuro, we're underneath the car looking at the suspension. This is the rear suspension from the back. You can see we have an 8.8-inch solid rear axle. The manual transmission turbo coupes came with a 355 to 1 gear ratio, and the automatics had a 373 to 1 ratio. This is for 87 and 88 only. They also had the infamous quad shocks. That's these sideways shocks here in the back to prevent axle hop on the 4-link design from the Fox body. Now, all turbo coupes factory came with a dual exhaust system that split after the catalytic converter. This car has been a little modified and has a much larger but single exhaust system. Now the rear suspension setup has a coil spring and a shock absorber on each side, along with a lower control arm that goes parallel, and then 2 upper control arms up on top of the rear differential. This unequal 4-link design has some drawbacks, but is generally pretty decent for most street driving and performance use. There is also a rear sway bar, standard in the 87-88 Turbo Coupes, and the only Fox body car to come with 4-lug rear disc brakes. Alright, we're going to try and do this Doug style, driving the 87-88 Ford Thunderbird Turbo Coupe. this particular car has a 5-speed manual transmission. It's a world-class T5 from the company that eventually became Tremec. The transmission is an aluminum case, very strong transmission actually. The problems with them was in the shifter. The transmission company was a little cheap in making the shifter and didn't include stops for the throws, meaning that if you tried to power shift this car and really nailed third gear, it would overshift and actually pull the shift fork right out of the transmission. Kind of a bad design. So if you get one of these and you want to do performance driving, the first thing you should do is install an aftermarket shifter with stops in it, just like this car has. The ride control no longer works in this particular car, and that's very common in turbo coupes. The ride control shock absorbers had an actuator motor at the top that would turn, and that turning motion is what turned the inside of the shocks from soft to firm mode. Nobody has reproduced those shocks, and original ones, well, they're all over 30 years old. So if your car doesn't have working firm ride, that's why, and don't expect to be able to replace it, unfortunately. What do you say we give it some boost, huh? Now going into the corners, you got to be a little careful. Stock Fox bodies like to spin around quite a bit because of that unequal length four-link design at the back. Makes them a little bit tail happy. That boost never gets old. It has a little bit of lag. This turbocharger is the larger T3 from the 83 to 86 turbo coupes, but it really isn't bad. It really isn't bad at all. I mean, I'm at 3,500 RPMs, and it's pushed like that. And it's just right there. It's not as instant as some of the newer cars, especially anything with like a ball bearing turbo on it or anything like that, but it's not the boost laggy thing that was the 911 turbo in the 80s. This car's very different than that. The best thing about rear wheel drive, you could do a burnout. Stock, the Turbo Coupe is not exactly a fast car. Quarter mile times were typically around the mid 15-second mark. That being said, they're so easily modified. That valve we showed you earlier under the engine bay is really all it takes to add more boost to these things. The factory fuel system and computer are easily able to handle up to almost 300 brake horsepower with almost minimal tuning. So it's super easy to get this car to be a real performer. Mid-14s are not out of the question on a completely stock, basically setup. In between tires, some more boost and a little bit of tuning. That being said, they are a quick car. They are a fun car. I've long maintained that it is much more fun to own a slow car that you can drive fast all the time and not break any laws than it is to own a really fast car that you can never really drive fast. Because, you know, as soon as you get on it, you're speeding and, you know, you're going to get in trouble. This car kind of strikes a compromise. It's fast enough to actually feel fast, but it's slow enough that you could still kind of screw around a little bit and not get in too much trouble. Giving it the beans a little bit in second gear, for example, won't really get you into that felony speeding territory that our old Project Cobra would. Some of the things Doug talks about inside a car is how quiet it is, what it's like to drive, things like that. One of the things we like to talk about is how much fun it is. I feel that Doug doesn't quite give quite enough gravitas to putting a big dumb grin on your face. And the Turbo Coupe absolutely does that, especially one like this with a couple of modifications and a little bit more boost. they're an absolute riot. Every time you get to the boost, you just can't help but grin like an idiot because it's so much fun. You could daily drive this car and not even really think about it. That being said, put it in high boost mode and wail on it, and it becomes a performance car. It becomes something more. The dual personality of this car is really its most attractive feature. If you're a performance driving enthusiast and you like unique cars, you really need to give one of these a shot. If you're into bargain performance cars or really like iconic cars from the 80s, the Thunderbird Turbo Coupe is a great one to grab. It provides rear-wheel drive, a turbocharged engine for easy tuning, and lots of personal luxuries. Now, these cars could come with a lot of these things not optioned. You can easily find turbo coupes without cornering lights, without a moonroof, without power seats, and other things like that. The only option this particular car is missing is a full leather interior. It would be nearly identical, only with leather covering instead of cloth. Options don't seem to matter as to the values of these cars. It really comes down to condition and miles. The more stock a car is and the lower mileage it is, the more you can expect to pay. So let's talk a Plays with Cars score. I could go through all the different features and subcategories and try and combine them all up into an arbitrary number like Doug does. And I get it, I do. I love the Doug score. However, I'm not Doug, and I can't score this car like he does, because my opinions are going to be skewed compared to his anyway, being such a fan of these cars. We're going to go ahead and come up with a Plays with Cars score, and that's basically a rating of 1 to 5, should you buy this car? A 1 being, go ahead and pass, it's grandma's Grand Marquis, you don't want it for performance work, and 5, which is absolutely, you should buy this right now. We're going to go ahead and give the Thunderbird Turbo Coupe, especially the 87 to 88 years as shown here, a solid 4. And the reason for that is, these cars were really, really advanced in their time. You had a turbocharged, intercooled engine with electronic fuel injection that had multiple levels of boost and timing available on a switch in the dashboard from the factory. These engines are incredibly tough and can take a ton of modifications thrown at them, but they also return pretty decent fuel mileage and are easy to work on. The rest of the car is very solid, easily one of, if not the best Fox chassis ever built by Ford. That also means that it's going to be a better performer part for part as any of the other Fox chassis go, and because it is a Fox chassis, all the parts that you could buy for Mustangs and such pretty much fit on one of these. There are a few things, like the control arms being longer, you have to get through more specialist shops, but they're still not very expensive, and you can still make these cars really, really perform well. That makes them a great value and bargain for people like me that like to throw the modifications book at something and really personalize it. Another thing that makes these cars such a good buy is their uniqueness. Think about it. When's the last time you saw a turbo coupe out and about? When's the last time you saw one at a car show, an autocross, a drag race? You're going to be probably the only person with this car, any of those, unless you're joining a turbo coupe club meet. Let's face it. And it's hilarious. These cars were so popular back in the day, even the 83 to 86 versions, that a lot of people remember them, or at least remember Bill Elliott or Bob Glidden's cars, and can kind of put their thumb on going, oh yeah, I remember those. Those were pretty cool. So that's going to do it for this review from Plays with Cars on the 87 to 88 Thunderbird Turbo Coupe. Again, our final value was a 4 out of 5 on should you buy it? And yeah, you really should think about buying one of these. If you've got the means and funky 80s American cars with turbo motors and rear-wheel drive are kind of your shtick, you really should be trying to find one of these cars. If you like modifying cars or you like being unique or having something different, again, you should probably buy one of these cars. If you want a comfortable daily driver that is not the same Fox body Mustang as everybody else, you should probably buy one of these cars. Anyways, I hope you've enjoyed watching our first Plays with Cars review video, and if you like it, drop a comment below, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, let us know. We can do some more of these. We do have more than one cool old collector car that we could talk about for performance enthusiasts like yourself. Check them out in our other videos. So until next time, this is Michael, Plays with Cars.